been a lot of trade rumors around Luka Doncic, especially centering around the Utah Jazz. So, excuse me, let me ask you this, JD. What do you think about that? Do you think that Luka could play alongside Lauri Markkanen, who is emerged as one of the cornerstones of the Utah Jazz's franchise? And how would that look, in your opinion?
This is an interesting one.
Mm-hmm,
he's definitely a superstar in my eyes. He's a top 5 player. This is coming from a Utah Jazz fan. And I'm really trying, it seems like anywhere Luca would go, he would maybe make his team better, Anybody would want him. That's probably the consensus thought on him. And I mean, I've heard these rumors. In fact, if you just typed in Google Luka Doncic, one of the top stories was Luka to Utah, from Sports Illustrated. So there have been trade rumors around it. Do I think it's likely? No, I don't know. I don't think so. He's a young guy. He's a franchise player. I don't think the Mavs are going to be giving him up. But what's interesting to think about it is, like we mentioned before, where there's smoke, there's fire. If there's some reports, some of the top stories are talking about him going to Utah, of all places, then that means there's probably been some talks about it, which is very interesting. It's intriguing. Utah has a ton of draft capital. They could probably make it happen. Luka could get a big haul anywhere, You get a ton of good players, you get a ton of good draft capital. But it's interesting that, maybe Utah's trying to go after him. Would he be a good pairing with Markkanen? So Luka, in my eyes, I do like Luka. I think Luka is an incredible player. Like I said before, I think he's a top 5 player. But I also think that he might not have a competitive mentality. Sometimes I see, and this might be a hot take, but how many times have we seen Luka whining about calls, not getting back on defense, coming in overweight in the off season? I mean, he's obviously a talent, but almost like you could compare him a little bit to Cat. Cat is a superstar talent, but maybe he doesn't have the competitive nature, the mentality to have what it takes to be like a top 10 player, or to get his team or will his team to the playoffs. I wonder if Luka's like that too. I mean, it's early to say. I think he's like 23, 24 still. Would I want him in Utah? Yeah. I mean, maybe. I think it would be a fun switch of things. Maybe that would be what the Jazz needed. I remember Danny Ainge saying that he wants the team to be a competitor for a championship ring in the next 2 to 3 years. And so you need to make crazy plays like that in order for it to happen. What do you think, Doc?
I like Luka. I do. I do not see his, and when you think about it too, theoretically, if Luka were to ask out, that would be the only way Dallas would ever let him go. Mark Cuban came out in an interview and stated that he completely took the blame because it is his fault. It's his team for not being able to put together a championship team around Luka. He blamed it on take fouls and this and that. He thought that going into next season, they would be just fine. They're just going to try to run it back. And there's actually been reports of them in advanced conversations with Dennis Lindsay for a consulting role in their front office. So I would assume Mark Cuban is going to do everything possible to try to keep Luka before Luka asks out, if he does. With that said, if Luka were to ask out, the Utah Jazz are probably one of the only teams who could construct a package robust enough to get him. So I could definitely see him going to Utah. I think the fit would be a little different for him because he is used to complaining quite a bit at every call. And the the head coach of the Utah Jazz, Will Hardy, has put an emphasis on redirecting and restructuring the culture here in Utah. They play hard, they play fast, they get out in transition, and they don't go away. You can be up by 20 points and they're still going to find a way to chip down that score and possibly beat you. Like the Utah Jazz in one season became a cultural phenomenon for us, especially here in Utah, in the sense that we're so used to watching our guys slowly and methodically take the ball up the court, and this is a young athletic team that is going to fight you till the bitter end. And I loved the culture. That's a winning culture to me. And what I would be afraid of is Luca coming in could potentially upset the development of Lauri Markkanen, who just won Most Improved Player of the Year, which he absolutely deserves. And I think he's going to continue to make steps and get better and better.
Yeah.
So I would just hope that if the Utah Jazz do decide to trade for Luka Doncic, I hope they don't give up too much. Though you'd have to give up quite a bit for Luka. And I hope Luka comes here with the mentality of, okay, how can I make this team better? And like, can we really make a run here? And I think a lot of that would have to be him gelling with Will Hardy and Lauri Markkanen. So, and he would have to stop complaining about fouls. He'd have to play some defense because that's what the Jazz do. They play defense. And Will Hardy's going to play you hard. Mm-hmm. You just have to be used to that. And I don't know if he could handle that. He might not like it here because of that.
If you think about it too, Doc, I mean, there could be definite pros and cons. And like I mentioned, I'm not too sure that Luka's going to be parting ways with the Mavericks. But if he did come, there are some great defensive presences here in Utah. I mean, one of which being Walker Kessler, who's been a great defensive player. And I even thought a little bit about Atlanta trading Gobert maybe to the Mavs, who's they absolutely need some sort of rim protector right now. And so maybe they'll go for that in the offseason. Or maybe with their number 10 pick, they'll go for somebody who's really good on defense, maybe someone like Derek Lively. I know he's projected to be a little bit higher than that, but that's absolutely what the Mavs need right now.
Yeah, defensively they were atrocious, especially when they got Kyrie Irving. There was just no defense going on whatsoever. And the Utah Jazz do have a roster, I agree with that, where they could cover up his inability to defensively stay on the ball. They definitely could. They got some great pieces.
It would definitely be an interesting